she said, "Oh, that makes sense." Which, when she told me that, I was like, huh? What do you mean? Hi guys, welcome back to our channel. If you're new here, welcome. Here is the place that we advocate for disability inclusion to spread awareness and make the world just a little bit brighter. My name is Janelle, and a quick visual description of me: I have on just a black shirt today, and the background is that I am in my room. Today we will be talking about early signs that I had Tourette Syndrome that people around me missed. I probably will be taking a lot more in this video just because when you start talking about your tics, they kind of start popping up more. Kind of like when you talk about yawning or see somebody yawn, then you start yawning. It kind of has the same effect. There are so many people that are diagnosed with things late in life, especially I feel like girls and women are often kind of late and diagnosed, and whatever issue they're kind of dealing with, people kind of dismiss it. So I think it's important to kind of share and just kind of talk about my experience and how people missed it for so long. If you want to know a little bit more about my Tourette syndrome journey, I talk about that in a separate video. I'll link it right here for you to watch if you'd like to know more about how I got diagnosed really late in life, like way later, as an adult, even though I've had it since I was a kid. I'm using a post by The Truth About Tics. You can go follow them on Instagram. They had posted this thing about early traits of Tourette's, and I remember seeing it and really identifying with a lot of these things. So I'll be kind of using that to guide things that I bring up in the video, as well as talk about some other things too. The first thing coming out the gate that was really a big thing in my life that people will miss out on was sensory issues. Now, of course, everybody has some sensory preferences to a degree, but I feel like I definitely had a tactile aversion to a lot of different things. The earliest that I was told about it, like that now I realize what it is, the earliest is when I was a baby, and I was at the stage where I was eating food with my hands and kind of trying to eat on my own. I would do this with my fingers and kind of have like a grossed out look on my face. And I remember my parents saying they thought it was really funny, like they couldn't really tell what I was doing. As I got older, it just kept going and I just kept getting faster. And even now to this day, when I eat foods that are like, or just have anything that can possibly get in between my fingers, I just do this. So like if I'm eating something crumbly or crunchy and I take a bite, as I put it down, I'm already doing this. It's like pretty unconscious just because I don't like the feeling of things in between my fingers. That showed up really early, like I said, as a baby. That continued to show up as I ate. That showed up when I would wash dishes. I never liked washing dishes, not just because you're a kid and you don't like to do your chores, but like there would be food particles in the sink and there would be food particles in the sink, and I remember them, and it's just gross because like you can't do this and it wipe away. Like it's not like a dry crumb, it's like a wet crumb, and okay, I'm done talking about it, but you get the point. Another thing I know with certain textures, like I could not stand pantyhose, knee highs, that texture, like the can't do it. We got in a lot of arguments. I got in a lot of arguments with my mom as a kid because she was like, "Well, you have to wear pantyhose when you go to church. Your outfit's not complete. You eat pantyhose," and it would just be so uncomfortable. And I would always find a way to like get them to rip so that like part of me was comfortable. I don't think I was doing it on purpose, but I think when they did rip, I was like, oh, yay. It was just extremely uncomfortable. So we tried knee highs instead, which are the same texture. They just come up to your knees. And that was still like so uncomfortable. I would end up just like pushing them down. I just could not. And that was a fight every other week, all the time. Another thing with clothes was like turtlenecks, like things that were like tight around my neck. Even if there's t-shirts that are too tight around my neck, I'm like always pulling at it. If my clothes are sitting weird on my body, to this day, but yes, also as a kid, I was always like picking and pulling at my clothes because there's certain parts that feel really uncomfortable and I like have to fix it. So that was a lot of different things, and I'm sure there's probably something else that I can't think of at this moment. But yeah, All these things pretty much were very strong as a kid, and to this day, still is a thing. The next thing that was something as a really young child, um, I don't necessarily know if this is more towards Tourette syndrome or just being neurodivergent in general, but I was always really emotionally sensitive, like easily emotionally sensitive. And I feel like there's a lot of people that are neurodivergent now that talk about that, how they're, like rejection sensitivity or just different things like that. They're really emotionally sensitive, highly sensitive people, anything like that. That was me as a child. I would get upset easily by words people said. Um, I remember one time in first grade, I ran to the teacher crying because this kid called me a crybaby, and I'm pretty sure the teacher was like, I remember her face. She was just like, "Okay, go play," because I literally came running and crying. I would get really frustrated easily, especially at myself if I was doing stuff in school and I couldn't get it. I'd get frustrated so easily, so quick. Doing simple things like working on math, I'd start crying because I wasn't like getting it or understanding it. And if I wasn't understanding it fast enough, I start crying. And to this day, if I get frustrated easily on tasks that I can't do, it like really upsets me, and I try not to cry. The next thing that I would say was an early sign that people missed was, um, people might call it like just kind of like socially inappropriate behaviors, quote unquote. Like I remember being excessively silly, like I would laugh a lot to the point where people are like, okay, like chill. And I know that a lot of people with conditions that are, under the neurodivergent umbrella really like feel things intensely. And I think if something was really, really funny, I just could not stop laughing to the point that I would get in trouble. The teacher's like, okay, like the joke is over. It's not funny anymore. The same thing with if somebody said something that kind of hurt my feelings, I'd feel stuff really, really strongly. Even now and back then, I feel like people would describe me as really bubbly, cheerful, and those are once again those emotions that I'm feeling. I feel them really strongly. There's not really, I don't think, ever just like a meh. Like I do feel meh sometimes, but if I do feel something that I can't identify, it's always pretty strongly. The next thing that was really obvious to me, I remember these things. It was really obvious as a kid, were like more ritualistic behaviors, doing things a certain way all the time. Now, of course, people with Tourette syndrome have, um, co-occurring conditions pretty often. I think 80% of people have at least one co-occurring condition. So it's really common for people to have Tourette syndrome and OCD, ADHD, anxiety, sensory issues, depression, rage, um, impulse control, hyperactivity, stuff like that. So as a kid, I remember having to have things a certain way. Like I will tell you, I will break it down. For me, it showed up a lot in organizing food. So I don't really know. Like it just kind of how it popped out. I'm sure I organized other things, but food for sure, I felt like I had to eat it in a certain pattern or a certain order. For example, waffles. I ate a lot of waffles as a kid. I really loved waffles, like the frozen waffles. I would pour syrup on my waffles, and I would observe the plate that I had, and I felt like I had to eat my waffles from the least syrupy to the most syrupy, right? So the one with the least amount of syrup in order, and I'd pick around it to the last one that had the most amount of syrup. And I always have to like say something in my head right before I ate the last, um, waffle. I did the same thing with, um, other like meals where you can tell kind of like least to most covered in something. And then when it came to foods that were an assortment of things, such as like Chex Mix, I had Chex Mix often as a snack. I would take out the pretzels because they were a little too dry for me. I had the cheddar Chex. So the cheddar Chex come with those little bread things with the little like ridges in it. I'd eat all those first. I would eat the triangle, um, cheese, I don't know, like a Cheez It, the triangle ones. I'd eat all those. I would take the brown Chex out. I don't know which, probably the corn. I don't know which one's the wheat. checks and which one's the corn checks, but I took the brown checks out and I ate them from least cheesy to most cheesy. And sometimes I would line them up so I can keep them in order because, sometimes a lot came in your package. And then I'd take the other checks and do the same thing, line them up from least cheesy to most cheesy. And I had to check both sides because sometimes it was a trick. Sometimes you'd be like, oh, this one doesn't have that much cheese on it. And then you flip it over and you're like, oh, never mind. And so I always put the most cheesy side on my tongue. So I would examine every one. Some of them were kind of equal. I'd just pick a side and I would eat them in an order. Now I would get upset when somebody would walk by and be like, oh, can I have one? And, of course, as a kid, you can't be like, no. And so I say yes. And they would take one that was like further down the line that I was prepping for because it's out of order. Ritualistic stuff like that really got to me a lot. I had a scene that I would like play in my head whenever I ate Hamburger Helper. We also ate a lot of Hamburger Helper. And there's a scene in SpongeBob where SpongeBob is like doing a cook-off with the mermaid guy. I don't remember his name is King Triton or something like that. And it's the whole scene where they're there and he's like inciting cheers from the crowd and they're like making the sandwich and he has swordfish like chopping items and then SpongeBob is like just making one patty like really like with love and the guy's like chopping it up, flaming it up. And during like each little part of the scene I would take a bite and imagine it. So I wouldn't talk to anybody. Like nobody talked to me. Like I had to do that when I ate Hamburger Helper. And the scene would be where he was doing that. He would pass the mermaid guy would pass out the Krabby Patties to the whole audience. Everybody would take a bite. I would take a bite, right? And then they'd all spit it out. I would not spit it out, but I would imagine it while I was eating. And then the guy would laugh because SpongeBob only made one Krabby Patty, and then he would taste it. I would take a bite, and he said, "Oh, like he really loved it." And he said, "This is so good. I wish I had another one." He spits it out. It's like the same, like unchewed, and everybody's grossed out. And when he ate it a second time, I had to, take another bite. And that was pretty much the scene, like where the scene ended for me in my head. Now, if I was finishing up my bowl of Hamburger Helper and I saw I only had so many like macaroni to meat left, I would take smaller bites because I had to end what I was eating on the end of the scene, if that makes sense. Like I had to finish my bowl with the end of the scene, otherwise it'd be messed up. Of course, that's something more internally. I don't necessarily know if people would imagine that because I wasn't like saying anything out loud, but that was something that I did every single time I had Hamburger Helper. Imagine you having to do something every single time you had rice in your life. Like, that's a lot. So, those were things, just other ritualistic behaviors that were more apparent that everybody seemed to miss. The next thing I would say is impulse control or impulse control issues. For example, I interrupted a lot when people were talking just because I had an idea or I had something to input. I would just say it, and the impulse control is kind of like stopping those impulses. Also very talkative. If something else came in my head, I would just add it. And I was told a lot as a kid, you talk a lot. Why do you talk so much? You need to stop talking so much. She's really chatty. All the things. Maybe it could have also just been a personality trait. Some people really just enjoy talking more than others or more social than others. So don't, think if that's what your child's doing, then automatically means they have Tourette Syndrome. But I mean that it was an example of impulse control not really being that strong, or an impulse control issue. But yeah, since I was in elementary school, I remember being called chatty or that I would talk too much. Sometimes people would say, sometimes you just need to be quiet. And I really hated that about myself. And it was like when I was in it and I was talking and explaining stuff, I couldn't really like stop myself because I just had so much excitement, right? Goes back to the thing I was talking about, like when you're feeling emotions, you feel them strongly. Going with that, like the excitement of what I wanted to say or wanted to share, or what I watched last night and this and whatever. So yeah, I dealt with that a lot. But I think, of course, if you look at all these things, there's some things that kind of overlap that are like a combination of stuff. And the last thing that was an early sign of Tourette syndrome that nobody seemed to pick up on is more obvious, so I just saved it for the end because it's really obvious. So it was very fidgety or quirky. Those are some really common things that people with Tourette syndrome are described as. Quirky for sure, fidgety if nobody really knows what's going on, because you are always moving, right? So the story now has changed. So if you are going to go watch my Tourette syndrome journey, this part is not going to be in there, but I will tell you. I started having tics around 15 or 16 years old that I remember. But the other day, I was meeting up with a friend from elementary school that clearly we haven't seen each other since elementary school and haven't been able to keep in touch or anything. And she said when she found me on social media and found my information and saw me posting videos about having Tourette syndrome, she said, "Oh, that makes sense." Which, when she told me that, I was like, "Huh? What do you mean? what do you mean that makes sense?" Because like I said, I don't remember having tics until I was 15 or 16. And we knew each other like third, fourth, and fifth grade. So I was like 8, 9, 10, 11. So what do you mean? What do you mean? And she said she remembers me always being really fidgety and what she thought was just my personality, just kind of being quirky, doing things with my head like this or doing stuff with my eyes, which now I know are tics. And oftentimes when you have tics as a kid, they, whatever level they're at, for example, mine might have been really mild, they tend to ramp up a bit in adolescence. So that makes sense, right? Thinking about her saying she knew, I'm like, wow, that makes sense, because maybe I had really mild tics that nobody around me noticed, as well as all the other things I just mentioned, and they didn't really ramp up until high school, and that's when I was like, ooh, what's happening? But a lot of kids that will have tics and not even realize what they're doing. You can see them like while they're watching TV or playing video games ticking, and they won't even know. Like, people will ask them, why do you keep doing that? Or why are you doing that with your face? Why are you doing that with your mouth? Why are you doing that with your head? And they're like, what are you talking about? And so that very much could have been my reality. Because clearly, Homegirl knew when she saw my videos. She was like, well, that makes sense. Because she could remember us when I was younger doing things like that. So she caught on. Who knows how many other classmates I had when I was younger caught on that I just, of course, don't know now because we don't really talk. But who knows? It could have been other people that thought the same thing, that thought I was really fidgety or quirky or squirmy or anything like that. So, but I feel like that is a bit more of a common sign that's when people start to kind of pick up on something, when people keep doing the same motion or making the same sound again and again. So, but yeah, that was my experience as a kid, and somehow people missed it. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you have Tourette syndrome and you can remember some early signs you had Tourette syndrome, you can put them down in the comments. If you are a parent that has a kid with Tourette syndrome, put those down in the comments. If you do not relate at all, you can still feel free to comment below something that you liked about this video, something you learned. I love to hear, your feedback. I love to hear what you got out of this video. And thank you so much, guys, for watching. Please like and share to help make the world just a little bit brighter. Thanks, guys. Shine bright.